You and up to 3 quote-unquote friends are competing to have the sweetest fort on the block, full of super cool toys and a metric ton of pizza. You'll build this fort by building a deck of cards representing all the other kids in town. But kids are fickle, and they'll be tempted to leave to see what other forts look like, especially if you forget to play with them. Whose fort will be the best? Let's find out in Fort by Letter Games. Give somebody the first player card, dump all the pizza and toys tokens into a central supply, and give each player a reference card, player board, their 2 corresponding best friend cards as indicated on the back of that player board, and their matching score marker and fort level marker. The fort level marker starts at the 0 space of the fort level track. Put the victory track in the middle of the table with the macaroni sculpture card nearby. All players put their score markers on the 0 space of the victory track. Shuffle the 11 made-up rule cards and deal the number of players plus 1 into a face-down stack, returning the rest of the cards to the box. Similarly, shuffle the 9 perk cards and deal the number of players plus 1 to a face-up row. Then, shuffle all 60 kid cards and put the deck face down near the victory track. Deal 3 of them face up into the park below the victory track, like so. Then deal out 8 more of them to each player. You can look through all your kid cards at this point, but once you're somewhat familiar with what you've got, shuffle them together with your 2 best friend cards and form your own face-down deck. Then draw 5 of them to form your starting hand. You can tweak this step once you're familiar with the game by drafting your starting cards instead. Each player is dealt 8 kid cards, chooses 1 to keep by placing it face down in front of them, then passes the rest to the left. Repeat until all cards have been chosen, then shuffle the 8 cards you drafted together with your best friends to form your deck before drawing your starting hand of 5. Before we get into what the gameplay looks like, let's go over the components so you know what you're looking at. Every card will have a symbol in the top left corner indicating its suit. There are 6 suits, as well as the wild coin suit, which can be treated as any other. And some cards may indicate 2 suits. The box at the top of the card is called the public action. This action can be followed by other players, meaning if they play a card of the matching suit, they can copy the public action. We'll talk about that more later. The box in the middle of the card is called the private action. This action can't be followed by other players. 2 of the cards in your deck are best friend cards, indicated with this star icon next to their name. You'll never lose your best friends unless it's by choice. Other cards can potentially be stolen by the other players. Now let's look at your player board. At the end of your turn, you'll put cards you don't use face up in the area above the board, your yard. Some actions will allow you to store cards in your lookout section, up to the level of your fort plus 1. Cards you put here can never be replaced or removed. Whenever you gather resources, meaning pizza or toys, you'll put them in the stuff section. You can hold up to 4 of each. Some actions will also let you move resources from your stuff over to your pack, which can hold up to a total of your fort level plus 1. And down at the bottom is your fort level track. It starts at 0, but it'll score you more victory points at the end of the game the higher you can advance it, as well as boosting the capacity of your lookout and your pack. Whenever you increase your fort level, you'll have to pay the resources indicated between the level you're at and the level you're advancing to. You can pull these resources from either or both of your pack or your stuff. A blue hex is a toy, orange is a slice of pizza, and white can be either. We'll talk about this a little more later, but for now, let's get into the meat of the gameplay. The game is played in turns, starting with whoever has the first player card and going clockwise until the game ends. Whoever is taking the current turn is called the leader. The leader's turn has 5 phases. The leader completes all 5, then ends their turn. First is cleanup. You'll skip this on your first turn, but on each subsequent turn, start by discarding all the cards in your yard by placing them face up in a discard pile to the right of your board. Next, choose whether you want to play a card from your hand. If you don't, skip ahead to the recruit phase. If you do, you can use one or both of the actions on the card in any order. Just make sure you finish one action before starting the second. A detailed explanation of all the symbols in these actions can be found starting on page 12 of the rulebook. If the card has any actions that show an X sign followed by a suit icon, you can improve that action by playing more cards of that suit. Cards of that suit in your lookout also count toward this total. You can't use either of the actions on any of the cards you add to the original card, though. You also can't add any cards from your hand if their suit doesn't help you. At least one suit of every card you add has to contribute to the effect of at least one of the actions you're using. You also have to use at least one of the two actions on the card you play fully. You do get to decide how much, if any, of the other action you use, though. And again, you can take the two actions in any order. Say, for example, you play Bud when you don't have room to add 2 pizzas or toys to your stuff. You wouldn't be able to use only the public action on this card in this case, so you'd have to use the private action, trash one card. Then you'd be able to use part of the public action to gain one resource, since you only have to use one of the two actions fully. If the card you play is a coin card, you'll decide what its suit is and announce it to the table. This may or may not necessarily matter to you, but it will definitely matter to the rest of the group. Once the leader has resolved the card they're playing on this turn, the rest of the table, in turn order, have the option to follow the public action on that card, whether the leader used that action themselves or not. To do this, you have to discard a card from your hand with a suit that matches the played card. Or in the case of a coin card, you'll have to match the suit the leader announced when they played it. Again, you'll have to be able to use the action in full to use it at all. If the leader already resolved this action, and it involved gathering a choice of either toys or pizza, you can only gather the same resource the leader chose. If the card you discard has multiple suits, one of them has to match the played card, but the other can be counted toward the action itself if it applies. After the play phase, the leader has to recruit one card. You have 3 options for where to recruit the card from. You can take any of the cards in the park. If you do, replace it with a new one from the park deck. You can steal from any other player's yard. They don't get to replace it. Or you can draw a card from the park deck. Wherever you take it from, the new card goes straight to your discard pile. Once you've recruited, discard the card you played, any cards you added to it, and any best friend cards you still have in your hand. If you have any other cards left in your hand, put them face up in your yard, facing away from you. Finally, draw 5 new cards from your deck. If your draw pile is ever empty, shuffle your discard pile to reform it. Let's expand on the subject of fort levels. To increase your fort level, you'll need to use an advance fort action, then spend the resources required like we talked about earlier. At the bottom of the level tracker, you may notice some icons under levels 1, 2, and 5. When you reach level 1, you'll be able to privately choose one of the made-up rule cards in the central stack and put it face down in front of you. This'll score you extra points at the end of the game. At level 2, you can take one of the face-up perk cards in the center of the table. Some of these give you a persistent effect for the rest of the game, others can only be used once. A glossary with all the possible perks and made-up rules can be found on the last 2 pages of the rulebook. And the first player to reach level 5 gets to claim the macaroni sculpture, as well as triggering the end game. In addition to a player reaching fort level 5, there are 2 other ways to trigger the end game. If any player reaches 25 victory points on the victory track, or if the park deck is depleted. However it's triggered, the leader finishes their turn and play continues until everyone has had an equal number of turns as leader. Then, everyone totals their victory points from their victory track, fort level, any made-up rule bonuses, and an extra 4 points for the macaroni sculpture. Whoever has the most points wins, with the highest fort level serving as the tiebreaker. And that's how you play Fort. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like that, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and most importantly, go on over to twitch.tv/BNB Tabletop and give us a follow there. We play board games live every Sunday night at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time on a show we call The Board and Barrel. And it's a very interactive broadcast. We have house rules that you guys can influence throughout the course of the game, virtual bingo, you can bet on who's gonna win. It's a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing you there.